and Dessa, two urban explorers from Arizona, set out to film their next adventure. Their YouTube channel, Forgotten Horizons, was gaining traction with a growing audience captivated by ghost towns and abandoned places. That night, their GPS took them on a strange detour off Route 89, down a dusty road that wasn't even on the map. They drove for 10 miles, deep into the silent desert, until they saw it, a rusted sign, half swallowed by the sand. Whisper Ridge Motel, vacancy. For just a moment, the sign flickered with a faint red glow, then went dark. The air was still, heavy with an unnatural quiet that seemed to press in on them. Ryan, ever the adventurer, was intrigued. Dessa felt a shiver run down her spine, a prickle of unease that the desert night couldn't explain. This wasn't just abandoned. It felt forgotten by time itself. Ignoring the growing sense of dread, they decided this was a discovery they couldn't pass up. They pulled their car off the cracked asphalt, the sound of the engine dying echoing into the vast emptiness. The motel stood before them, a dark silhouette against the deepening twilight. A perfect, unsettling scene for their next video. They grabbed their cameras and flashlights, stepping out into the cold desert air, completely unaware that this detour wasn't leading them to a forgotten place, but to a place that wouldn't let them be forgotten. They parked near the dilapidated office, its windows like vacant eyes staring out into the darkness. With a push, the door creaked open, releasing a gust of dry, stale air that smelled of dust and decay. Inside, a thick layer of sand coated everything. The counter, the floor, the faded promotional posters peeling off the walls. An old, tarnished bell sat on the reception desk. More for the camera than anything else, Ryan reached out and gave it a sharp tap. The ding that followed was unnaturally loud, echoing through the empty building for far too long, as if the walls themselves were hollow and impossibly deep. While Ryan filmed the strange acoustics, Dessa's flashlight beam landed on an old guest book lying open on the counter. The pages were brittle, the ink on most entries faded into illegible smudges by time and neglect. But as she carefully turned the delicate pages, she found a few entries that were strangely preserved. One line, written in a hurried, almost frantic script, caught her eye. It read, "Room 9, checked in, June 12th, 1976. Can't leave." She let out a nervous laugh. "Creepy," she said, showing the page to Ryan. "Probably just some old prank." Ryan agreed, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. The date felt wrong, too specific. He panned his camera across the room, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, revealing a long, shadowy hallway stretching away from the reception desk. The doors to the room stood like silent sentinels, waiting. The air grew colder and the silence seemed to be listening. The key to room 9 was still hanging on a dusty board behind the counter. The tag attached to it was metal, and when Dessa picked it up, it felt strangely cold, almost wet to the touch. The number 9 was etched into its surface, worn smooth by time. They walked down the silent, suffocating hallway, their footsteps the only sound. When Ryan slid the key into the lock, he felt a strange resistance. Then an audible click echoed down the hall, but he hadn't turned it. The door had unlocked by itself. He pushed it open, and they stepped inside. The room looked preserved. It wasn't just abandoned. It felt like its occupant had just stepped out for a moment. A half-smoked cigarette rested in an ashtray on the nightstand, a thin wisp of smoke still curling into the air. A bedside lamp was still plugged into the wall. The bed was made with military precision. The sheets pulled taut without a single wrinkle. "Someone's been here," Dessa whispered, her voice barely audible. The curtains over the window swayed gently, yet when they checked, the window was nailed shut from the inside. And then they heard it, a soft, rhythmic sound coming from the vent near the floor. The faint, unmistakable sound of breathing. On the nightstand, next to the still smoldering cigarette, Dessa found a small, portable cassette player. Her fingers trembled slightly as she picked it up. It felt heavy, older than it looked. With a hesitant click, she pressed the play button. A woman's voice, raspy and weak, whispered from the tiny speaker, "Please, check out before sunrise." The voice was followed by a burst of static, then a faint, distant scream that was abruptly cut off by a familiar sound. The sharp, echoing ding of the motel bell from the front desk. At that exact moment, the door to room 9 slammed shut behind them, plunging them into absolute darkness. Ryan yelped, dropping his camera. The camera hit the floor, but kept recording, its lens pointed up at them. For a single, terrifying frame in the video feed, a figure was visible standing right behind them. A figure wearing the exact same jacket Dessa had on. They scrambled for the door, panic overriding everything. It wouldn't budge. They were trapped after what felt like an eternity of pushing and shouting. The door suddenly swung open into the silent hallway. They didn't hesitate. They ran, leaving the camera behind on the floor of room 9, still recording. Ryan drove them away as fast as he could, the motel shrinking in the rearview mirror until it was gone. The next morning, consumed by guilt and confusion, Ryan went back. Dessa was gone. He had dropped her off at their apartment, but she wasn't there. Her footprints in the sand in front of the motel vanished halfway to the office. The camera's battery had died at 5:28 a.m., just before sunrise. But when he checked the SD card, he found something impossible. The footage was exactly 6 minutes long, and it was repeating in a loop. He watched it once, twice, and on the third loop, something changed. His own reflection appeared in the dusty motel room mirror, but it wasn't him. It was someone else, smiling back with a horrifyingly familiar grin. And through the static, he heard a whisper, Dessa's voice. "Checked in." Weeks later, after Ryan Hale was reported missing, a local sheriff's deputy finally located the Hales' abandoned car. Tracking the signal led him to the Whisper Ridge Motel, a place no one in the department had ever heard of. The deputy searched the grounds. Every room was empty, layered in decades of dust. Every room except room 9. Inside, the scene was just as Ryan's camera had last recorded it. The bed was perfectly made. A cigarette in the ashtray was still faintly burning, its smoke rising in a slow, hypnotic spiral. And on the front desk, the old guest book lay open. There was one new line, written in fresh ink. It read, "Checked in. Ryan Hale, June 12th. June 12th, 1976. The exact same day as the other mysterious entry. Whisper Ridge wasn't a place you could find on a map, because it wasn't just a place. It was a trap. A loop in time that captured lost souls. A place with a permanent vacancy for those who never check out. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy stories about the strange and unexplained, be sure to follow our channel for more journeys into the unknown. Stay safe out there.